This is going to be my fourth or fifth epoxy coffee table project, and they just keep getting a little bigger, which means they get a little more complicated. This one is going to be made out of some oak rounds that I cut off of deadfall down by my cabin. The top and bottom piece are two halves of a whole slice, as are the left and right pieces. You can see where I knocked out the punky center, chiseled that all out till I had solid wood left, and just kind of trim them and massage them and move them around until they kind of fit together like a well-worn jigsaw puzzle. And these oak slabs are about 1.5 inches thick, and I didn't want to pour that much epoxy. That would be real expensive. So if you look down, you can see some little pine boards that I have numbered down there that take about half of that space up. So I stuck those chunks in there. I'll just pour my epoxy over the top, and those will be on the bottom. And to fill the gaps on the top half, I got a couple of Manzanita boards here that I salvaged from an old dead Manzanita stump. Sliced them up with my bandsaw, and they're very termite riddled, as you can see in these views. And I'm just staring and thinking here. I haven't come up with an idea yet. So I'm kind of documenting this more for my sake than for anybody else's, because it seems like I always have to relearn my skills every time I do one of these tables. I can't do more than one a summer, so these take quite a bit of sanding, quite a bit of hand planing, and quite a bit of massaging to get them from here to the middle of my living room. Okay, here's a view after, must be almost near the last pour. The epoxy I use is not deep pour epoxy. I can only pour 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch layer at a time, so it takes several iterations to get it to this point. As a matter of fact, this doesn't even look like it's the final pour because there's still a lot of wood sticking up. But on this one, I decided to leave the center open, and I was either going to put a medallion in or re-pour that with epoxy at the end, or take one of these knot warts off of an oak tree and put a candle holder right in the middle of this table. So besides the Manzanita pieces, there's 4 in here, top and bottom, left and right. You really can't see because they're too shiny there. I added some oak rounds that I cut off some limbs. So I'm not really pouring all that much epoxy. Once I get all the wood in there, you just pour around it. I used a purple dye in the epoxy, and I added some mica powder to make it really cloudy. I like that effect, and I don't want to see the depth. I don't want to see the boards I put under there for filler, so I want it non-opaque. So this view, I've got a hand planer that I learned off my last table. This is so big I can't run it through my regular wood board planer. So I bought a hand planer, and by golly, that sure knocks a lot of time off of sanding. You just got to be careful. You can't take it down too far, too quick. So you move it around back and forth like you would any kind of a hand plane. Don't cut too much off, and it really makes the job a lot easier. You can see the wood grain really nice here on the oak. The Manzanita, top and bottom, left and right, starting to come through. And you can see the hole in the middle. I put a piece of aluminum in there and taped it so that the epoxy wouldn't stick, and it would leave that hole there. On the bottom, for my non-stick, for my epoxy covering, I use bird feed sacks. They've got a coating on them that keeps the epoxy from sticking, and they just pop right off like you would use mold release on them. Here's another view. Got it planed down a little closer. Not getting close to sanding yet, but taking my time and going down a little bit at a time. The really neat thing about this Manzanita wood is you can see where it's really blonde on the edge. That's close to the surface of the wood. The sun burns that outside of that wood, so it's very light, and in the core is the darker red. It's very pretty wood, nice to work with, really dense. Comes out very pretty. There's another picture, more planing. You can see where I got a little ambitious on the hand plane, the motorized hand plane, and you can see the gouges running bottom to top on a lot of places here. They're a good 1/8 inch thick, so I got a lot to go down, so I'm not really worried about getting those out. I'll back off and go a little thinner on future passes. The center, I don't put that in until last. That little knob there, that'll go in last. It's just sitting there for looks, to see how it looks with the rest of the stuff there. Okay, this picture here looks like I'm playing down to final height. It looks like I might have even started sanding this already. The epoxy looks like it's the same level as the oak rounds, so if I haven't started sanding, I will start sanding soon. No, I have sanded. There's a sander right up there in the top view. It's sure nice having that vacuum hose hooked up to that sander. There's a lot of splits in this oak. This oak wood, if it's down and you want to use it for something like this, you either got to deal, if it's solid, it'll be split and it'll fall apart on you. Or if it's a little more solid, it'll be hollow in the middle, or it'll be full of that punky stuff. So you don't never get a perfect piece of wood to work with, but with epoxy it's very forgiving. You just fill all the holes and it holds it together like particle board. Here's a nice view. I'm really gone to town on the sanding. It looks like I've even taken my hand router and rounded the edges around the oak slabs. The oak wood is really looking pretty. The Manzanita really looks pretty. Candle holders in there for a visual effect, and I've probably wet this down with a paper towel so it got all the dust off of it, and it really looks cool. Down on the bottom, that bottom oak piece, you can see those holes in the wood there. That's from those wood boring bugs. Besides the termites in the Manzanita, you get the wood borers in the oak, and they give you all these little defects that fill with epoxy and kind of make it look neat, but you got to dig all the little powder they leave behind as they go through the wood. You got to dig those out. That's a pain in the butt. Here's another view, different angle. You can see how I kind of cut the Manzanita pieces. It looked like a half of a guitar to fit in the cutout punkwood section of the oak pieces. Just only did that because it makes it a little tighter fit and takes up less epoxy. Okay, after the epoxy pour and sanding it down, you come up with all these air bubbles. Got to buzz them out with a little Dremel tool, open them up, and they'll fill with epoxy. But if they're above wood or the bubbles are caused by wood and the atmosphere has a pathway to the wood, they'll rebubble because the wood is not sealed up totally. So rather than take a chance of pouring them, I went through with some super glue and filled up all the little holes. I'll just run the sander over all these and I'll be ready to pour another coat. This table took a lot of epoxy. Once I got it to this point, I poured a bottom coat in black so you can't see anything on the bottom, and then I poured a clear top coat. I poured probably 2 or 3 bottom coats and 4 or 5 top coats. Here I've just poured another flood coat on top, and the centerpiece is not in there yet. It's just sitting there. But all the wood is covered, and that's clear, so it makes the oak a darker brown, the Manzanita a darker red, and it looks pretty good. I like it here. So it's been set up in my garage now for probably 2.5, 3 weeks. so it's starting to drag on. Anxious to get it finished. I set this up on blocks underneath it so it'll drip around the edges. I'll go back, flip it over, and have to sand those little drips off the bottom. Okay, now you can see the center knot is finally epoxied in, and it's even gotten a coat of epoxy on it. I took a Forstner bit, and I think it was a 2-incher, and I opened the mouth of it into a rounder hole. And I put a chunk of wood in the bottom so that the candle that's here stands off from the bottom. It doesn't really touch the wood. It gives a little bit more of an air gap to stay cool. I don't have any kind of fear that this will catch on fire from a candle in there, but it's just up so you can actually see the candle holder. And this is just a candle holder I borrowed from my wife to form fit this. But it's looking good. Pretty glossy. Almost time to buff out. Here's another view of the same thing, same time, just turned at a different angle. Here's a little better view of the candle holder. You can see that it's been epoxy coated. And one of my wife's expensive candle vases sitting there. Gotta be careful not to break that and go put it back before she realizes it's gone. But it's pretty glossy. You can see the reflection of the trees outside my garage. I'm getting close. In between coats and sanding, I work on the table legs. And the cross pieces on the bottom table legs came off of an old glider rocker that was on my porch forever until I finally junked it and salvaged just the wood pieces. So I used those, some of the holes that were in it, I drilled out and put plugs in so you can see plugged holes there. And then the pedestal is a scrap 4x4 I had laying around. It's the only one that wasn't treated. So I ran that through my planer and rounded the edges and cut the grooves for those legs. I didn't figure that would come out at all, but it came out pretty darn good. I was impressed that I had the patience to make that work. Then we sanded it all down, put a little stain on it. I ran a V-groove down the center of the pedestal, and you can see a couple of holes there. Those are for some conchos that I ordered to replace one that I lost on my belt. But I found the one on my belt, so I had 10 of these I didn't have anything to do with. And I thought, I'll just put them right there on that pedestal. Looks pretty cool. And then the V-groove, the indention on all 4 sides, flat sides there, I stained dark brown so that it contrasts with the rest of the table legs. More of the same here. And this looks like the final product. Oh yeah, I also got 4 horseshoes. The guy that leases my cabinet runs cattle on the place down in California. I go over to his barn. He gives me all of his used horseshoes. Got them in a big pile. I haul them home in a bucket and I put them in my sandblast cabinet. Sandblast them, clean them all up, then paint them whatever I want. In this case, silver. And I put one on each of the feet with 1 screw holding it right at the bottom of the U. You can see them. And then they're just barely touching the pedestal. And here you can see the conchos have been glued in, and the pedestal table legs have been attached to the table. And this one is just about ready to go up into my room. Looks good in this picture. Here's an overhead view of the table sitting in my driveway from the last view. You can kind of see how the epoxy coloring came out. The thing about putting that mica powder in your epoxy is you got to come back every 10-15 minutes until it sets and stir it. I stir it with a toothpick to keep those swirls in. Otherwise you just kind of get a faded pattern. But if you put the swirls in, it looks like smoke in motion. I even do the little pockets in the wood if they're big enough to put the toothpick in and stir. All these little wood rounds drove me crazy. I didn't coat them good enough originally, so I didn't get a good seal on them, and they just air bubbled on me forever and ever and ever. That's one of the reasons I had to put so many top coats on this thing. And here you go. It's sitting in my room right next to the one I made last summer. The blue one from last summer is a 36-inch round table with 3 table legs, and it's Manzanita and oak rounds. And the candle holder sitting on that table comes off. It's just a portable one, and that's made from an oak bowl or a knot on an oak tree. And the one that I just finished, that's just a candle I had laying around. I ordered some candles that come in the little glass cups from Amazon, and I'll use those in that candle holder. But one of these is going to go. I can't have 2 of these things sitting in my room. It's not that big. So I don't know which one I'm going to keep yet. We'll see how it works out.